Vine stood in front of the bed, lost in thought, the white lace of her wedding dress a stark contrast against the soft sheets. Her heart was heavy, still filled with the weight of the unexpected turn her life had taken. Suddenly the door opened with a crack, and Jungkook walked in, stopping abruptly when he saw her in the room. He looked at her with a mixture of confusion and irritation. "Jungkook, what are you doing in my room?" he asked, his voice cold and emotionless. Vine turned to face him. "Vine, I don't understand," she said, her voice small and soft. "I am your wife. We just got married today. How can you say that what I am doing here?" He crossed the room in a few strides, coming to a stop a few feet away from her. "Jungkook, I told you before the marriage," he repeated, his voice firm. "I never wanted this marriage. I was forced into it by my family." He turned away, a scowl on his face. "Jungkook, and I will divorce you as soon as possible," he said, his voice cold and emotionless. "This marriage was a huge mistake, and I want it ended as quickly as possible." One felt a pang in her heart at his words, the finality of his statement hitting her like a punch in the gut. She took a step towards him, her heart breaking further with every word he spoke. "Wine, but we are married now," she said, her voice wavering. "You just can't decide you don't want to be married anymore. We made a commitment." Jungkook cut her off with a sharp, derisive laugh. "Jungkook, a commitment we were both forced into," he retorted. "There was never any choice in this for either of us." He looked at her with a cold, unreadable expression. "Jungkook, and I don't like anyone in my room," he said. "Go to another room. I want to be alone." Vine felt a shiver run down her spine at his harsh tone. She wanted to argue, to plead with him to change his mind, but the look in his eyes told her it was polite. She swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded reluctantly. Vine slowly made her way towards the door, her wedding dress swishing softly against the carpet. At the door, she paused, looking back at him one last time. "Vine, Jungkook," she said quietly, her voice breaking, "please can we talk about this?" He did not look at her, his gaze fixed on the floor. "Jungkook, there's nothing to talk about," he replied coldly. "Go." Vine bit her lips, feeling the weight of his rejection sinking into her heart. With a heavy heart, she left the room, closing the door softly behind her. He sat down on the edge of the bed, his mind racing with thoughts. He looked down at his prosthetic leg, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "Jungkook, sympathy," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. "Everyone looks at me with pity, like I am some sort of wounded bird. They feel sorry for me, but they don't actually care. They never care, not really." The weight of his past weighed heavily on him, the memories of lost friends and broken relationships adding to his burden. He closed his eyes, feeling the familiar pang of loneliness wash over him. It was a feeling he had become all too familiar with. "Jungkook, I don't need their pity," he said aloud, his voice low and hoarse. "I don't need anyone's pity. I just want to be alone, left alone." His gaze fell to his prosthetic leg, the smooth, cool surface reflecting the dim light in the room. He had not always been this way. He used to be strong, athletic, with the world on his feet, but now all he could see was a reminder of what he had lost. It was a constant source of pain and shame, a symbol of his weakness and failure. Vine sat on a small chair in the guest room, her wedding dress pooling around her on the floor. She was devastated, her heart shattered by Jungkook's cold words and dismissive attitude. She closed her eyes, a wave of sadness overtaking her. She knew Jungkook had warned her before the marriage that he had been forced into it just as she had. But her situation was even dire. Her parents were abusive, and this marriage was an escape from their control. Now, as she sat alone in the small guest room with her marriage already in shambles, she could not help but feel like a fool. Wine, what have I gotten myself into? She whispered to herself, tears welling in her eyes. Wine, I thought this was my chance to escape my parents' abuse and enjoy my life with him. She continued, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought marrying Jungkook would give me a new life, a chance to be free. But now look at me, my husband does not even want me here. He wants to divorce me as soon as possible, just like he said. She let out a bitter laugh, her shoulders slumping in defeat. When I should have known better, she muttered, shaking her head. But I was so desperate to escape my parents' control. I was so desperate to live a life with him after just looking at him. I fooled myself into believing that this would be any different, that he would be different. When I have to talk with him, I don't want to leave him. She took a deep breath, stilled her nerve, and stood up from the chair. She knew she had to try to talk to Jungkook, wants to save this marriage. She left the guest room and walked down the hallway, her heart pounding as she approached Jungkook's room. Without knocking, she entered in his room, her heart pounding in her chest. But her eyes widened in shock when she saw Jungkook sitting on the bed, removing his prosthetic leg. She had not known about his injury before. Jungkook looked up at her, his expression dark and guarded. Jungkook, what are you doing here? Why? What happened to your leg? She asked, ignoring his question. Her voice soft and gentle, but Jungkook's face twisted in anger. Jungkook, stop your drama, he snapped, his voice cold and harsh. I don't need your sympathy. I don't need anyone's sympathy. Just leave me alone. Wine, what do you mean a drama? She asked, confused. He looked at her with a mixture of anger and disappointment. Jungkook, I already told your parents about my leg. He repeated, his voice firm. I made it clear that I was unemployed and that I had some physical limitations. Wine shook her head, unable to comprehend. Wine, but why did not they tell me? He fixed his gaze on her, his eyes sharp and accusing. Jungkook, which drama are you playing, huh? He snapped. You expect me to believe that you did not know about my leg. I told your parents and now suddenly you act all surprised. You felt a lump from in her throat, her mind spinning with confusion and shock. Why, no, I swear I did not know, she protested, her voice breaking. I had no idea. They did not tell me anything about this.